Hello, everyone. In this small lecture, we are going to be covering a few of the remainder of the concepts, such as objects and variables, how they're represented in memory, and how we can print and compare them with our custom created classes. Again, the focus that I would like everyone to focus on for this week is to make sure that you understand the constructors and how we can inherit from them, as that's important for the homework. But for our remainder of this lecture, we're going to be focusing on a few of these examples. So, again, whenever we declare variables that are built in, such as integers or strings, we kind of think of these as objects. But now we're going to be taking a look at how these objects that we create normally, like a dog object or an animal object, are represented in our memory. So, again, every time we create a built-in type, such as an int string, it's going to be assigned to a fixed location. However, a variable that we have, usually referred to as a reference variable, it's going to be pointing to a location in memory that is explicitly storing that object. So this is why we have this new in the initial assignment, because we are trying to assign a new memory location to store in that object. Now, you might have noticed in a previous lecture I had a null in my printing out because I had nothing there. So essentially, if we don't initialize an object with the new when we're referring to this location, it's going to be stored in a value called null, which means that there's nothing inside of it. Now, again, whenever we assign one variable to another variable, the value that's stored in the location is overwritten with the value that's stored in the other's location. What this means essentially is that if we go ahead and try to copy this code here, and what I'm going to do is inside of my animal driver code, just going to print this into here, and you'll notice I'm doing like a single inline comparison here. What I can try to do here is I'm going to print out my num1 like so. And then what I'll do is let me try to run this code really quick. And we'll see we get our 12 twice. And then if I say num1 is equal to num2, we'll notice what essentially is happening here per the textbook is that the value stored in one's location is overwritten with the value stored in the other's location. So essentially is that we are now getting the location from number 2, and we're having this number 1 point to it over there. So now it's essentially storing that there. Now, again, whenever we are assigning these variables, like so with this weight idea, we are technically doing the same thing. However, the value that is stored represents an address in memory where the object is stored. So we're not making a copy of the object, but we're rather setting the second object variable to point to the same object as the first. And this is an important thing to remember. So essentially, our dog, if we do something where we have our two dogs set up like up here, what we're saying when we say D1 is equal to D2, something like this, what we're saying is take the location of where this is being stored, D2, and have D1 point to it. And what that means is that because D1 is now pointing to this location of D2, when I say now D1.age or D1.name, it is now going to get the values that D2 has inside of this memory address. And now, oops. This one probably wasn't declared just properly, but again, this is essentially what's happening when we say this D1 and D2 stuff. We were making a point there. So that's just an important thing to remember when you're doing these items. And this is something that you'll get more familiar with as you're doing more examples of it. A focus that I want to really show off, though, is these object comparisons. So whenever we do the equal operator, it is going to compare two references and not just the objects that they refer to. So let's go ahead and try to explore this concept here. So if I say system.out.println D1 is equal to D2, we'll notice here that if I try to run this code, I'll get a false that's down here. And if I set D1 equal to D2, and I try to run my code one more time, you'll notice I'll get a true. And essentially what's happening when we say equals is we're saying take the memory address of where these are pointing and see if they're equal to each other. Now, again, this might not work sometimes for our primitive types, but for our self-created types, this is going to work out just fine because we're pointing to the memory address, so that's why they're equal. But you'll notice as well that sometimes D1 is equal to D2. We'll see here that if I do my display, that these aren't actually the same. You'll see here that the values are completely different. My dog 2 has two dog 2 name, blue, orange, and ages of 8. And so why are these guys actually equal? And this is where we can implement this override of the equality statement to make sure that we have it the way that we want it to work. So the way that we can pretty much override equality checking is that if we make a method public void toString, oh, excuse me, not toString, that's later. What I'm going to create here is a public Boolean method that is called equals. And what this is going to take in here is most likely another type of object that we want to compare it to. And what are we trying to compare here? Well, we're trying to compare animal objects. So usually we're going to create, or most likely you're going to call it the same type of object that you're currently in. And I'm going to call it as other. So essentially I'm taking in an other animal, and I'll call it like this other animal. And what I'll say here is in this scenario, we want to try to look at what we have as our variables in our animal class and say, how do we know that two animals are the same? So essentially, what we can say here is, let's just say for argument's sake that we want the name to be the same. So what we could say is return, we're going to say that two animals are the same if the name is the same. Return name, which is the variable that's up here, is equal to other animal dot name. So now what we'll say here is that if the name of my current animal is equal to the other animal's dot name, then this will work. And now if I try to run my code down here one more time, you'll notice that we're still getting the true because the equal actually compares the memory address of these two objects. So what we're going to try to print out here is print line is if the d1 dot equals d2. And now this should return false for the time being. Oops, excuse me, because now that we set, or it will return true, because if we go ahead and we print out d1.name, and let me go ahead and print out d2.name, we'll see that I get the dog2 twice. So let me go ahead and do the ln. And now we'll see we get the dog2 twice here. Now what if I go ahead and I set d1.name equal to just to be dog instead of dog2? And let me go ahead and print out this guy one more time. Put him down here. So now we'll see that I get the dogs to be the same. And you'll notice that I'm getting an interesting type of thing here, that when I have my dog set d1.name is equal to dog, you'll see here that it also changes my d2 name as well, which is an interesting occurrence of what happens when we set these values to be the same. So what I'll simply do here is kind of get rid of some of our concepts here, or excuse me, some of our code that we're working with earlier. And now what I'll do is instead of setting d1 equal to d2, what I'm going to check is if the name of d1 and d2 are the same. And let's go ahead and just print out their names before we do this. Here we go. And we'll see here that my name of the first one is dog. The name of the second one is dog2. And now both of these are false because they're not going to be the same. So what happens now if I set d1.name equal to dog2, like so? We'll see now that I get it true because what my dot equals is checking is if the two names are the same. And again, this is up to you on how you want to implement it. Maybe you want to make sure that the name, the fur color, and the eye color are all the same. So what you could check here then is and fur color is equal to other animal dot fur color, and so forth. And if you have getters and setters set up already, then you can use dot get fur color and so forth as well. But again, this is just showcasing how this kind of equality looks like, and maybe how you might get certain scenarios where your variables are changing without you really knowing why. And one last thing that we want to look at is this toString method. So this toString method is essentially going to print out a string that is automatically called whenever you use system.out.println or system.out.print. So to showcase this one more time, if I use system.out.println of d1, like so, and I run it, you'll notice that I get the memory address of where this dog object is being stored. So what I could do to fix this is I can say public void toString, and what I can say, oops, sorry, public string toString. Let's just see here. And what I can say here is return, for the time being, let's just return this is a test. And let's see what happens when I run my code off of this one. You'll notice that I just get called the D1 statement of toString. And what we can return instead here is something like this is the name of this animal is, and then we could say plus, you know what, actually, let's just try to do a bit more with inheritance. I'm going to leave this as this is a test because I just realized now that we're working inside of the animal class. So right now we have this is a test, but if we go into animal, or excuse me, dog.java over here, and we go ahead and we recreate the public string toString method inside of our dog class, what will happen is we can now say something like, or return the string, return, this is in the dog class, and then I'm just going to format the dog by saying speak plus speak, like so. And then I'll say dot name plus speak, something like this. Cool. And now we could say here, oops, plus name and speak. Now if I go ahead and I try to run my code now, you'll see here that I have, it looks a little weird, but essentially what's happening is that I am now getting the definition from my toString of my dog class because it is being overridden. And you'll notice here that in your Eclipse, it actually tells you overrides week 6 animal.toString, and it overrides the other ones too. So again, this is a bit more of experiments with how equality works and how they check it out, or excuse me, how they check each other out. But make sure that you understand how you can override methods, such as the equality statement, and how you can make your print statements look a bit neater by using these toString methods.